There is a powder that costs 50 cents and silences a squeaky hardwood floor in less than a minute. No tearing up boards. No driving hundreds of ugly finish nails through your stain. No hiring a contractor to rip apart a floor you spent thousands installing. You sweep it into the crack between the boards. You step on the squeak, and the squeak is gone. This powder has been known to carpenters since before the First World War. Every apprentice in the 1920s learned it during their first week on a job site. Master builders in Victorian England used it on every staircase they finished. Japanese woodworkers applied it to temple floors that needed to remain silent for meditation and ceremony. Then the flooring repair industry did the math. Americans spend over $10 billion a year on hardwood floor installation and repair. A squeaky floor is one of the most common complaints homeowners bring to contractors. And the standard fix that contractors quote today runs anywhere from $200 to $2,000, depending on how many boards they claim need to come up. A 50-cent powder that solves the same problem in 60 seconds is not something that industry wants on your radar. They did not forget this technique. They just stopped mentioning it. This is the story of powdered graphite, the floor silencer that carpenters trusted for a century and that the modern repair industry prays you never discover. To understand why this works, you first need to understand why your floor squeaks in the first place. Wood is not static. It is constantly moving. Every plank of hardwood in your home expands in humid summer air and contracts during dry winter months. Over years, this seasonal movement loosens the bond between the surface boards and the subfloor or joists underneath. Gaps form. Not gaps you can see, but gaps just wide enough for two surfaces to rub against each other every time weight shifts above them. That rubbing is your squeak. Two pieces of wood grinding together under pressure, creating friction noise with every footstep. The squeak is not a sign that your floor is failing. It is a sign that two surfaces need lubrication. And that is exactly what carpenters in the 1920s understood. They did not see a squeaky floor as a structural problem requiring demolition. They saw it as a friction problem requiring a dry lubricant. The solution was sitting in every workshop in America. Powdered graphite is pure carbon arranged in hexagonal sheets stacked on top of each other. The bonds between atoms within each sheet are incredibly strong, but the bonds between the sheets themselves are almost non-existent. When pressure is applied, those sheets slide over each other with almost zero resistance. That is why graphite feels slippery between your fingers. That is why pencil lead glides across paper. And that is exactly why it silences wood joints. When you sweep powdered graphite into the seam between two hardwood boards, gravity and foot traffic work the powder down into the joint. The graphite particles settle between the two surfaces that are rubbing together. And those hexagonal carbon sheets create a permanent dry lubricant layer that allows the wood to move freely without generating friction noise. The key word is dry. Wet lubricants like oil or silicone spray would soak into the wood grain, cause swelling, attract dust, and eventually gum up into a sticky residue that makes the problem worse. Graphite does none of that. It does not absorb moisture. It does not break down. It does not evaporate. It sits between the surfaces and does its job for years. French chalk, also called tailor's chalk or powdered talcum, works on the same principle. Talc is a mineral with a layered crystal structure similar to graphite. The sheets slide against each other under pressure, creating a low friction barrier. Carpenters who could not get graphite used French chalk instead. Both worked. Both cost almost nothing. Both were standard practice on job sites for decades. In the 1930s, a master carpenter finishing a home did not hand the homeowner a bill for squeaky floor repair. He reached into his apron, pulled out a small tin of graphite powder, swept it into the joints, worked it in with his boot, and moved on to the next task. The entire process took less time than writing an invoice. So, why does your contractor today quote you $500 to fix a squeak that a Depression-era carpenter fixed for free is less than hash-hone. Zero hash is greater than, because the economics changed. The flooring industry in the United States generates billions in annual revenue. Repair and refinishing services account for a massive share of that total. A single squeaky floor repair using the modern method, which involves driving specialty screws through the subfloor from below, injecting adhesive, or pulling up and re-nailing individual boards, easily runs between $200 and $2,000. A tube of powdered graphite costs $3 at a hardware store. A small bottle of talcum powder costs even less. You cannot build a service business around a product that the customer can apply themselves in 60 seconds for 50 cents. You cannot justify a $500 house call when the fix is a powder that any person can sweep into a crack with a broom. So the industry did what industries do. They reframed the problem. Squeaky floors became structural settling issues and subfloor delamination and joist separation requiring professional assessment. The language shifted from simple friction to complex engineering, and the 50-cent powder quietly vanished from the conversation. You will not find powdered graphite recommended on any major flooring company's website. You will not hear it suggested during a contractor consultation. You will not see it featured in any home improvement television segment sponsored by flooring brands. The absence is not accidental. It is economic. Now I need to be honest about something. This fix does not work for every squeak. If your subfloor has genuinely separated from the joist below, if there is actual structural damage, if the squeak comes from a broken or rotted board, then graphite will not solve it. Those are real problems that require real repair. This powder fixes friction squeaks between surface boards, between tongue and groove joints, and between boards and the subfloor, where the connection is still intact but has loosened slightly. That covers the vast majority of squeaky floors in homes across the country. But it is not magic, and anyone who tells you one solution fixes everything is selling you something. Here is exactly what to do. Go to any hardware store and buy a small squeeze tube of powdered graphite. It is usually found in the lock and key aisle because locksmiths use it to lubricate keyholes. A single tube costs $3 and contains enough powder to treat an entire floor. If you cannot find graphite, buy a container of plain talcum powder or unscented baby powder from any grocery store for under $2. Find the squeaky spot on your floor. Step on it slowly and listen for exactly where the noise originates. Identify the seam or joint closest to the noise. Squeeze the powdered graphite directly into the seam between the boards. Be generous. Then use a soft cloth or an old credit card to work the powder down into the joint, pushing it as deep as it will go. Step on the spot several times to help the powder settle between the rubbing surfaces below. Wipe any excess powder off the surface of the boards with a dry cloth. The graphite will leave a faint gray residue that disappears completely after a quick wipe. Step on the spot again. In most cases, the squeak is gone immediately. If a faint noise remains, apply a second round of powder and repeat the process. The additional graphite reaches deeper into the joint and completes the lubrication. For stairs, focus on the joint where the tread meets the riser, which is the vertical board at the back of each step. That junction is where most staircase squeaks originate. Squeeze the graphite along the entire length of the seam and work it in. That is the entire process. No tools beyond a squeeze tube and a cloth. No experience necessary. No boards removed. No nails driven. No finish damaged. 60 seconds and 50 cents. A homeowner in Ohio documented this fix on a 1940s colonial revival with original white oak floors. The upstairs hallway had squeaked for 11 years. 3 contractors quoted between $800 and $1,600 to pull up boards and re-nail. She applied powdered graphite to 6 joints on a Saturday morning. The hallway has been silent for over 2 years. The graphite did not wear out because it does not break down. Those hexagonal carbon sheets do not degrade, do not evaporate, and do not lose their lubricating properties. The powder sits in the joint and works every time the wood moves. Year after year, season after season, every carpenter born before 1950 knew this. They learned it the same way they learned to read grain direction and sharpen a hand plane. It was fundamental knowledge, passed from one generation to the next on job sites across the country. Then one generation stopped passing it down. Not because it stopped working, but because an industry discovered it was more profitable to let you believe that squeaky floors require professional intervention. The powder is still sitting on the shelf at every hardware store in America. $3 for a tube that fixes every friction squeak in your home. Your great-grandfather would have laughed at anyone who paid $1,000 for a squeaky floor. He would have reached into his tool belt and fixed it before lunch. Now you can too.